Yes, hi folks, this is Tim, aka Faceless Fat Loss. Tim, aka Faceless Fat Loss, thank you so much for being a subscriber. I wanted to continue along with the pathogen issue, parasite issue, Candida yeast type issue, because I firmly believe, and I have lots of support in this opinion, that it is an epidemic. It is plain and simple a raging, unrecognized epidemic. Ever since the advent of antibiotics back in the 1930s and 40s, antibiotics were a wonderful thing. They were often prescribed with probiotics because it was understood how they could destroy the good intestinal flora along with the bad bacteria. We have had a Candida overgrowth situation. It is almost impossible, even with probiotic supplementation, to avoid not having an overgrowth of yeast when you take antibiotics. I'm a firm believer antibiotics should be a very last-ditch resort. Keep in mind, what does antibiotic mean? It means anti-life. You might have noticed that the Supreme Court has reopened lawsuits against the pharmaceutical industry because so many people are being hurt by pharmaceuticals. The alternatives that we have to antibiotics are fairly large in number that are very safe. Their side effect profiles are minuscule to almost non-existent in comparison to the side effect profiles of antibiotics. If you have taken antibiotics any time in your life, for any longer than a few days, chances are highly probable you have a yeast imbalance going on in your bodies. If you've taken antibiotics for longer than that, you almost definitely do have an overgrowth condition in your body. Now, I'm not alone in my feelings about the yeast and weight gain connection. Dr. Carolyn Dean here has some great information on her site. You can read this for yourself. I'll just go over a couple things real quick. The miracle of antibiotics has its downside because it causes an overgrowth of yeast, as I just covered. The refining of sugar and wheat has its downside by creating a simple food source for yeast. You've heard me talk over and over again about refined grains. Refined wheats, there's just a ton of them on the grocery store shelves of the breads, the crackers, the cookies, all these little snacking foods that we eat. Folks, if we have an yeast overgrowth condition in our bodies and we're snacking on this stuff and it's in other parts of our meal, the pastas and stuff that we eat, what are we doing? We're perpetually feeding these yeast colonies, very likely contributing to a weight gain scenario. Now, let's see. I'm sorry for the. I'm really quick at running these things off. I was going to pause the video to continue. Let me, instead of pausing, run off some other information for you. There's a Dr. Janice Moore. She's one of many scientists. She has documented that once a fungus succeeds in establishing itself inside the body, a fungal yeast or candida condition, it can manipulate the systems of its new host, the host being your body, to serve its own needs. As an example, have you ever known a child who took a round of antibiotics and then suddenly they started, instead of eating the right kinds of proteins and vegetables, they would be craving instead, and fruits, they would be craving instead more of the sugary stuff and the bad carbs and the starches and stuff like that? Have you ever known a person who's been on a long-term antibiotics? I know someone who fits this to a T. This person that I know is a solid 150 pounds or so overweight. I know this person really well. I've known them for about 12 years now. She has chronic sinus infections that she can't get rid of without being on constant rounds of antibiotics. It's the only thing that seems to relieve it. I guess she said that her doctor might be giving her a vaccination or some kind of a shot to deal with it, and that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother video. I'm very much against that idea. But the point is, she has a really serious infection that can only be tamed by these antibiotics. As far as I know, her diet is pretty standard Western style diet. not very healthy, in other words, but she's not over consuming. She works a full-time job. She doesn't, I've asked her, and I do trust her response. She does not excessively overeat. She just indulges a bit in some of the bad carbs like so many people do. But if you're on a constant round of antibiotics, creating more and more of these colonies of yeast due to the destruction of your healthy bacteria, your healthy flora, and then you eat those kinds of foods, what are you setting yourself up for? Oh my gosh, continued yeast growth and continued weight gain, right folks? Now there's another study here I wanted to show you. Yes, this is from back in as early as the 1950s. Effect of prolonged antibiotic administration on the weight of healthy young males. They took a group of 15 to 20-year-old young men, and half the group was on antibiotics, the other half was not. And guess what happened? The group that was on antibiotics gained literally twice as much weight as the ones who were not on the antibiotics. Isn't that interesting? Now back to Carolyn Dean's article. I like to feature nationally known doctors and stuff whenever I can. I'm a researcher myself, not a doctor, so I like to be able to show you guys that I can support my research based on good, respected people whose opinions we would really appreciate. I wanted to show you what she was talking about. Oh yeah, cure here. Here we are. Diet. Avoid sugar, wheat, and dairy, as well as fermented foods and alcohol. You've heard me talk about alcohol. Besides, it's a toxin. Just don't consume it, folks. Just get it out. We don't need it. Substitute sugar with stevia. In another video, I'm going to cover alternative sweeteners, one of which I'm really excited to tell you guys about. It's my quote secret sweetener because it's even healthy for you. Bet you can't wait to get to that that one, right, folks? Take some good probiotics. There's some great probiotics out there with really high count and multiple strain. That's the most important factor. Look for those probiotics that have like 10 strains and up and 50 billion count. Just the multi-strain, in my opinion, is the most important one. And then the antifungal supplements, she references garlic. Eat 1 or 2 cloves a day. Well, you guys know by now that I'm huge on the allicin supplement. If you're taking the allicin supplement, especially during fasting, or if you think you're coming down with a cold or something, as a wide spectrum antibiotic, antifungal, antiviral component, it is far more powerful than just eating 1 or 2 cloves a day of the garlic. Far more powerful. And just to cover, here we are, the yeast connection has been around a long time, their information. The weight connection they reference in their yeastconnection.com here. People with yeast overgrowth often have weight problems, yet their health problems may be so severe that weight is the least of their worries. Here's my point. If you've ever known someone who has a severe yeast condition, candida overgrowth in their bodies, you'll note they have no energy. They have brain fog. They're often very miserable, and they can't touch bad carbs without having a terrible reaction. It is my contention that the excessive fat and excessive weight you may be experiencing is a symptom of the yeast overgrowth, meaning you don't have it as severely a yeast overgrowth as these other people do. You instead have a more moderate version of a yeast overgrowth condition, whereby the symptom is just excessive weight gain, excessive fat gain, instead of the full-blown, horrible no energy, depression, and all those sorts of symptoms. Now, what is the worst end result of yeast overgrowth? You guessed it, cancer. Solid evidence proving the fungus link to cancer. I will cover that in more details in upcoming videos. Thank you so much for being a subscriber. Love, happiness, health, and peace.